I've wanted to be a writer since I was about 8 years old. I remember being in a classroom and the teacher handing out returning essays, and at that moment I suddenly thought, this is what I shall do for a living. My book is about the greatest manhunt of the 17th century. It was the hunt for all the men who had been involved in the execution of King Charles I in 1649. Under the provisions of an Act of Parliament called the Act of Oblivion, they were to be hunted down and mostly killed. And I thought it was an incredibly good chase story. And so I invented a character, the only really invented character in the book, a man called Richard Naylor, who is chasing all these characters. And the novel describes how he sets about trapping them and follows in particular two men, a Colonel Edward Whalley and a Colonel William Goffe, father-in-law and son-in-law, who really existed and who fled to America. And for years they were hunted down and they had to hide in cellars and attics and barns. And my novel is the story of this chase. Well, I started reading when I was pretty young. By about 7 or 8, I was reading quite a lot of history books. The writers that influenced me when I was younger, H.G. Wells, I really liked. Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes stories. I've always liked Graham Greene, Georges Simenon, the Maigret novels in particular, and other writers, I suppose particularly George Orwell. He said he wanted to turn political writing into an art. By which he meant, I assume, creating imaginary works, books like 1984 and Animal Farm, to explore political ideas, and I like doing that. Among contemporary authors, John le Carré, who I knew, he was an influence on me, certainly. I'm what you call a morning person, so I like to wake up early. I think Stephen King does all his writing between falling out of bed and having a shower at about 10 or 11 in the morning. And I know what he means, because he thinks that the subconscious is most active then and you're most creative, almost still in a dream state. And I think that's true. I certainly have most energy in the morning, so I start by about 8 o'clock. And I aim to write about 800 words if I can, and then I stop at lunchtime and do something else, walk the dog. And it's very important the time when you're not actually writing, when you're shopping or seeing friends or having lunch. And then the next morning I wake up and the first thing I do is look back at what I wrote the previous day and correct it and get back into the rhythm of what I was writing before, and then start again. Sometimes when you write a book you don't know how it's going to end, but with this one I did know how I wanted to end it. Without giving too much of the story away, we know what happened to the older of these two fugitives, Colonel Whalley. We don't know what happened to Colonel Goffe, and that left me with a certain amount of room for manoeuvre. And we know that he, in the end, betrayed where he was living, and so it was possible for them to come after him again. And so it gave me the opportunity, after the main part of the story seems to be over, to bring everything back again. And I worked, as I wrote the novel, I worked towards this ending, which I hope is satisfying for the reader, and which just gives a hint in the final paragraph of casting the story forward.